it's getting really late, but if we can have 2 or to the utmost 3 questions or remarks, that would be enough, just really very short. Okay, please.
Thank you for the comment, and I happen to know more Arabs in Israel that deal with that, and it's really wonderful. I think that I didn't hear why the Muslims fight so much the education of Holocaust. What is their inner motive and formal motive? You think that it really happened, and especially in Europe?
We'll have the 2 others, and then okay, you and you.
Yeah, I wonder about memorizing the Holocaust in Morocco. Are you memorizing the Holocaust as a whole European matter, or do you memorize the Holocaust of Tunisia, Libya, and so on? Is it part of your memorial project?
Okay.
Please comment on how do you deal with the fanatic fringe? How do you stand up to it? What have you done about it?
Okay.
What does it mean?
What? How do you fight the fanatic fringe?
What is fringe?
Fringe is the most extremist groups.
The most extremist group.
Well, okay, just let people just going out.
Mr. Stoller, you know, this week, President Merkel of Germany said that the Holocaust was very part of the history of Germany. And she wanted to remind the Germans that this is something that should be brought on a yearly basis. So I don't know whether Germany is doing anything with that regard. Because if she's supporting it, then obviously that's the outrage.
No. I cannot resist it, Bruce, really.
Abdellah, it's great to have you here, and I think we all appreciate the fact that you come from Morocco to talk about this issue and what you're doing there. Kim mentioned Project Aladdin, and the King of Morocco really was, in a path-breaking statement a few years ago, got out and really spoke out, publicly. I mean, in favor of rejecting Holocaust denial. I mean, it was a unique statement from somebody coming, a leader of a country which is a member of the Arab League. My question is really: has there been any further moves by the state itself in that direction? Any kind of practical impact, or was this just a one-off matter, and people like yourself are left, struggling against the weight of the bureaucracy of the state, which is doing nothing to support it?
Okay. Shall we start? How would you like to start, or you?
It's the first question only, because the others for my colleague. It's very simple. They make the connection between the conflict of the Israeli Palestinians and Arabs with the issue of Holocaust. It's a mistake, but it's the fact. This is what they think. And I remember that when we went to Auschwitz, they attacked us in the newspapers, and they said that, where you go to the Holocaust, here you have a massacre in Jenin, and you can deal with it. You go there and make solidarity there. Why you go to Holocaust? And we began to explain to them in their logic. We said that we came from the massacre of Jenin. From there, see the suffering of our people there. This is what pushed us to go to the Holocaust and to know more about Jewish and Judaism and the history and the culture of Jewish. And when we wanted to learn about it, we arrived to the Holocaust and the Auschwitz. To explain this, it's simple, but it's not so simple to understand it. And we have a lot of job to do it. And I am very sorry, the conflict don't help us. If we succeed to solve this conflict, it will be better. But it's not the reason. I think that at least we have groups, different groups in the Islamic movements and the Islamic religions. We know that a lot of them, for example, the Islam of Morocco, the Islam of Sufiya, the Islam, it's very sympathy with every suffer of everywhere in the world. Jewish, not Jewish. It's, for example, on another side you have the fanatic that go with heats and fighting against Jewish, and after then the American, they all the time found the enemy to attack him. And the most simple enemy is the Jewish in this case, and for this reason they make it. But I think that the real Islam, the real Arabian culture, against the Holocaust, against Nazis, against every attack to the humanity. We have very hard struggle with them, against them in the Arab world and the Islamic world. I am very sorry because the conflict doesn't help us, but we have to go forward with the conflict, without the conflict, because it's at least it's for us and for our humanity. Thank you.
I will respond to three questions. The first one was about if the Holocaust was considered just an European subject. I think that it's one of the thing which based our work is considered also Holocaust to convince people that also Holocaust is some kind of part of Moroccan Jewish history, because when we went to Le Memorial de la Shoah, we find many documents with many Jewish deported from France to les centres de concentration with the name of Ben Hammo, Ben Yisho, Moroccan Berber name. So we took this documentation and we use it to convince people that also some kind of a part of our history. So we must also be involved in this. About other countries, I think Tunisia is more open to work with better than other countries. Algeria, there is nothing going on there. Libya, unfortunately, even if the Gaddafi regime was fall down, the Islamists who govern right now Libya didn't do so much. Even if a friend of mine who was recently in Libya, he participated with us in 2009 in Israel. When he came to Libya just to participate in a Berber events there, when they saw in his passport in Tripoli that there is Israeli stamps, they return him back in Morocco on next flight. This is just an example. For the next question, how do you deal with fanatics in Morocco? I think it's a very important question. I didn't have so much time to speak about, but just I will give you two examples. One of them is when we come back in 2009, and many of us spoke in newspapers, and Al Jazeera talked about us. We do many interview with them. Unfortunately, the Islamists attacked us, and the Pan-Arabists say, and many of educational association, especially with in the Islamist movement, asking the government at the time to remove us from the educational system, saying that we will pollute the brain of a generation. And recently there has been some, they put together, the Islamists, the Pan-Arabists, a new observatory to put a national list of person who normalize with the Zionists because they recognize Israel. And unfortunately, I figure in the top of the list. The final question from my friend, Bruce Madi Weizmann. Yeah, I totally agree that the king was said a very, very brief sentence at that time when he considered the Holocaust as a horrible massacre for the whole humanity. But and after that, he gave the green light for his counselor, the Jewish counselor Andrei Azoulay, to meet with many people from United States Holocaust Memorial Museum for the first step in building some project of teaching Holocaust in Morocco. Even if the club Maimouna in the University of Al Qawain did 2 years ago a small conference about teaching Holocaust, I think also the king have something positive thing to do in this project. Our work, we work alone. Unfortunately, the government, as I said before, didn't say to us, yes, you are allowed to work, but also didn't forbidden us for work. So I think it's some kind of yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. I've been reminded that I shall speak very short. So, sorry. Rejection, the reason for rejection of Holocaust education in Europe. Of course, it's a really important question, why some parts of the Muslim population or some organization reject Holocaust education. I think it's they're like different thing. On the one hand, they're Europeans, but they immigrated, so the older people brought with them some discourses, and they're to different extent confronted with media from non-European countries, and especially since 2011. There's also a strong anti-Muslim discourse in Europe, so there's a kind of re-Islamization also in Europe taking place. And I think in this context, it depends, of course, where the people are coming from. The Muslims in Europe, they are so heterogeneous. Some are from Turkey, from a like country. Others are from strong Islamic countries. So discourses are also very different. And also, like, the funding of European Muslim organizations is different from Saudi Arabia to Morocco to Turkish state institution like DITIB. So the discourses are quite different, but among many Arabic Muslim, there is this discourse, of course, if the Holocaust is just, the discourse of the Holocaust is just to justify the state of Israel and the state's policy. So this is a little bit the construct. Okay, we are Muslims, we are Arabs, so Israel is our enemy. I'm just referring a little bit to the discourse of anti-Semites. It's not a general discourse. So we are against Israel. The Jews are often conflated with Israel, and in this context, to talk about the Holocaust and to accept the Holocaust is a specific, is something very specific, which is totally different to a non-Muslim discourse in Europe. Okay, then with Merkel, I wasn't sure if it's just a remark or a question. Maybe you can repeat it.
Basically, she came out with a statement. She said that the Holocaust is very much part of the history of Germany. It's the third. Okay?
She said it will always be a part of the history.
I know, but what she's saying, what I'm saying is, are they organizing an annual Holocaust?
Yeah.
Probably invite many of the countries to influence. If exactly
Yeah.
meaning, so that this thing doesn't happen
Yeah.
again, you know?
So,
They are the ones that actually.
In Germany, there since the late 90s, there's a Holocaust commemoration event organized by the state, and I think the German situation, of course, is very specific in Europe because Germany was the country, or the Germans were the people who organized the extermination of the Jews worldwide, which was at some point stopped by the Allied forces. But for Germany, it's a kind of foreign policy too. So I did a lot of research on Holocaust commemoration events in Germany. So what you can see is a change in discourse over the time. At the beginning, in Germany commemoration events, there were just talks about people who has been persecuted by persecutors. There didn't appear the Germans as persecutors, and there didn't appear the Jews as the victims. But over time, this discourse changed, like from the main speaker at the state speaker at the Holocaust commemoration events, and now the main discourse is Germans, or some Germans, or Hitler and the Germans organized the Holocaust. The Holocaust are mainly the Jews, and there are also other groups who became victims of the Holocaust. And like in the sense of foreign policy, it's very important for the Germans to show that German is totally different than it was before. So what happens is it's a state event. Ambassadors from the first level are expected to come to this Holocaust commemoration event. And they invite everybody, also the Iranians, to attend this Holocaust conference. And a lot of materials produced to show Israel and the US that Germany really cares about it. So on the one hand, there's this state attempt, which is, of course, policy. To some extent, of course, people are different involved and think different things. And on the other hand, there's also among German politicians a rejection to some extent to deal all the time with the Holocaust, and the Jews should stop with this and so on. And there's also a strong discourse that the other countries should learn from the Germans about their history. So like in private discourse, you can find, okay, the French should learn to deal with the colonial past, and we Germans, we did learn and we are proud about. And so it's a contradictory discourse which takes place in Germany. Okay.
Thank you very much for your patience, and see you next year.